Welcome to the first episode of the new year, and a happy new year to all my listeners. In this episode, I'm going to do a little bit of a retrospective of 2019 before moving on to some call-ins I've received so we can catch up on some of them. So, my podcast started on the 28th of January 2019. I had been listening to other podcasts, mainly on YouTube, the likes of the Savage Worlds GM podcast, which sadly is no more. And then I discovered some audio podcasts, and through the audio podcast, I discovered some of the anchorites. And I was intrigued as to how the call-ins were working with these shows, because people were calling in, but nobody was giving out telephone numbers or explaining how to do it. So I did some research into Anchor and found out it was like a little cool little podcast app that you could put on your phone and quite easily do your own episodes. And I thought I might give this a go. Never thought that it would continue for any other time. I thought I'll do 2 or 3 episodes and have a bit of fun. That'll be that. For my first episode, I had done sort of reviews in sort of magazines that I had sort of edited in the past. So I knew I had to do a review. I knew how to pick the bones out of a product and talk about it. So it was a natural idea for me to pick something to review. And what better than D&D White Box, which is the granddaddy of all fantasy games. So I had my first subject. I knew how I was going to do it, but I didn't know what I was going to call my podcast. And obviously it's called Dragons Are Real, but where did the name come from? Well, there's sort of 3 threads to where the name came from. The first one was I wanted a name that would explain what it was about, that it was a fantasy-related podcast, and Dungeons and Dragons is the most famous, so a dragon would seem the obvious one. Secondly, I'm Welsh, so the dragon is the national flag of Wales, is a red dragon on a white and green background. So strike 2 for dragons. And thirdly, there's a cool rock song by Magnum called Dragons Are Real. And the lyrics are a story of a young boy that goes up to his bedroom and fantasizes about swords and sorcery. And for those of you on the audio podcast, I will play a clip of Dragons Are Real by Magnum. For those of you listening on YouTube, for copyright reasons, I won't put it on there, but I'll put a link to where you can listen to it. I never thought I'd be 40 episodes into it by now. At UK Expo, I bumped into one of the other OSR anchorites, Colin Green. We had a chat, went to a seminar, and we got a game in of Dark Plate and Demogorgons with John Allen Darge, who I knew from the Red Dice Diaries, and he was doing some GMing for Games on Demand. So we had a cool little 2-hour game as well. I mentioned to Colin that I hadn't got round to online gaming. I was a bit apprehensive about doing it. And he said that he had been the same. But he said, don't think about it. Just jump in, get in a game. And he said, once you've broken your duck, that'll be it. You'll be hooked. So I thought, yeah, I've got to do it. So I jumped on the Audio Dungeon Discord. And I want to put a big shout out to them because I was never a fan of Discord and I'm still not a fan. But the Audio Dungeon for the Anchorites is a great place, really friendly place. I met some great people on there. Went on there and Cody Mazza was running the Barrow Maze using Delving Deeper. So I signed up for that one and all the players and Cody made me feel really welcome. And after a couple of sessions of that, I knew that, yeah, online gaming was also for me as well. So I've joined in several games now. I've met some great people on the Audio Dungeon. And once you start the online gaming, then you can really fill your boots. I would say anybody listening, if you've not done it yet and you're a bit apprehensive, just jump in a game. There's plenty of people on the Audio Dungeon that are throwing games out. It's a GM-rich environment. They're quite happy to take newbies on and lead you through it. Join in a one-shot or a campaign. And once you've broken your duck, there is no real going back. So that was the podcast and getting that on the air and getting to do some online gaming. I also set up the blog and the website to tie into the podcast to try and sort of give a front face to it and to advertise some of the episodes, although I've never been expecting people to listen to it. It was just more of something I wanted to get off my chest. About October-ish time, I reached out to some of the other British podcasters saying, hey, how do you fancy doing a joint cast between 3 or 4 of us? Didn't know if it was possible or how we would do it. But John Allen Large from Red Dice Diaries, Colin Green from Spike Pit, and Dave Aldridge from Deeper Sentinel all got back in touch, said, yeah, we fancy doing it. And that's how the Purple Worm podcast was born. It wasn't always going to be called that. We had many iterations of names bandied around. It started off as 4 blokes, British blokes talking bollocks, but we thought, no, that wouldn't be very good for getting on places like Apple and Google. We bandied a few names around, and being Brits and having toilet humour and thinking of the Carry On films, some of them were really stupid. And I threw out my big purple worm, obviously the phallic symbol prominent in it, and we all started laughing about that, and we tried some other names, and then we kept going back to purple worm. We just all thought, yeah, it's funny. It's Zero Edition, because there was the creature of the purple worm, but also it's got the British connotations, and the purple worm stuck, and all of us have had an absolute blast doing it. We're hoping to continue in this new year, trying to cover sort of the British angle, and who knows where that leads to. And there's some other things coming up that I can't talk about yet, but I look forward to. We've also published the podcast on YouTube as well, as I have done with my own podcast, mainly being that lots of the younger generation now get their podcast addictions from YouTube as opposed to audio, so it can't help by putting it on YouTube, and maybe even if you reach 1 or 2 other people, then it's furthering the reach of the podcast. So that has sort of been my 2019. It's been a bit of a whirlwind for roleplay for me, but I've had a great time, and I've met some fabulous people on the Audio Dungeon Discord. They are a great crew. If you haven't listened to any of their podcasts, I highly recommend any of them. They'll do a sterling job. As for going forward to 2020, I've got some games that I want to get to the table, whether it be my face-to-face group or online, and I've also got some more rules that I want to review on the podcast. I've acquired some recently over Christmas, so I'm going to bring them to the table and do some reviews on them. So if you want more of this, then keep listening. So what else have we got in store for this episode? And now on to some call-ins. And the first one is from Rob C. from Down in a Heap.
Hey Pete, it's Rob from Down in a Heap. I enjoyed your episode on the War of the Worlds, and I think it's a really cool idea to have a post-apocalyptic setting that's based further back in our timeline. I don't know, that just really stirs my imagination more than a modern or far future post-apocalypse. And I wonder, I'm no H.G. Wells scholar, but would it be possible to incorporate some of his other story elements into that? I mean, could the alien technology have helped Captain Nemo build the Nautilus? Could there be alien technology for a time machine? Could there be Morlocks? Look forward to hearing more from you. Thanks. Bye.
As I said, Rob, doing a post-apocalyptic future in the past, it's definitely got something going for it. Oh, and I like your ideas, bringing stuff in from other works by H.G. Wells. Oh yes, that's got my creative juices flowing. And who have we got up next?
Hey Pete, it's John here. Just wanted to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Hopefully you'll get to catch up again at some cons, and who knows, maybe this fabled Purple Worm host meeting will get off the ground. Look forward to speaking to you in the new year, but have a great Christmas. I'll catch you soon, mate. Take care.
And that was John Allen Large from the Red Dice Diaries, And if you haven't already realised, he's also one of my co-presenters on the Purple Worm podcast. We've got another recording session coming up, and we've got a little surprise for you listeners coming up, so it should be a good one. And thanks for the Merry Christmas wishes, John. Same back to you and your family, and I'll speak to you in the new year very soon. And we have a call in from Evil Jeff next.
Hey, Pete. This is Evil Jeff from Meanings and Musings. I want to call and wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you for your podcast. It's one of the next ones on my list to get to. I'm just kind of far behind on some of them. I think you know how it is. But I wanted to say that I appreciate you putting out a podcast, and I look forward to hear what you've said in the past. And the more you put out on your own podcast and with Purple Worm. Have a great one.
That was Evil Jeff from the Minions and Musings podcast. Thanks for the wishes, Jeff. Much appreciated. And I hope you enjoyed the back catalogue. It's been fun doing it, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. So I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Hi Pete, Barney here. Thanks for your episode on all things mousy. Really interesting to hear your take on Mouse Ritter. And as soon as you had posted the link on the Audio Dungeon Discord, I ran to it, but I've only had the chance to have a quick look, so I really appreciate that. Yes, very exciting, especially that it uses Into the Odd as the background system. I do wonder just one thing. You kept saying that it's really simple. But when you start to have rounds that are X number of turns plus this plus that and all of these other things, that to me doesn't sound especially simple. So that's just my thought about that. But very exciting and a great episode. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Barney. I'm glad you're excited for Mouse Ritter. With regards to the turns, rounds, etc., yeah, I don't find it complicated. Maybe that's because I've been brought up with dealing with rounds and turns in D&D. But the author has thought of that. There is a nifty little GM turn tracker where you can record your turns and your watches, so I don't think it'll be a problem. But I will test it out and I will report back with immediate effect. Herr Loco Ludus.
Hey Pete, Jason here, Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Really enjoyed your review of Mouse Ritter. We go pick that up based on your review. So thank you for that. Excellent job summarizing the game and pointing out strengths. So always enjoy your reviews. Look forward to more in the future. Take care.
That's Jason Connolly from the Nerds Variety RPG podcast. I'm glad you enjoyed the review, Jason. I've got a few more reviews in the pipeline. I've been purchasing more stuff. Yes, I know. I've got enough stuff, but hey, I've got more, and it always comes in handy for review on this podcast, even if I don't get it to the table. Although, I'm going to try.
Hey, Josh Beckleheimer here. So I'm definitely going to have to check out that game on itch.io, because I'm sure my kids would love it. But what's funny is I was never really a fan of cartoon movies or Disney movies with the animals pretending to be human, you know. There's some exceptions, but I don't know, it always felt odd for me. My wife doesn't understand it, but I've always loved the idea of animals as their role-playing character games. And I don't know what the difference is, but I've always loved the idea of having mice or dogs, you know, those kinds of things as the player characters. And I was thinking, listening to your episode, how the Black Hat, you could easily do that. You don't even have to change anything about the game. Just tell your players, hey, in your background, list what kind of rodent you are, or list what kind of dog you are, those kinds of things.
That was Josh Beckleheimer from the JB Publishing podcast. I hope you do get this game to the table with your kids. I think it will be absolutely fantastic for kids. They would love something like that. I think they would identify more with animals than they would with probably a generic fantasy setting. And I think you can take any generic fantasy setting and fit it into animals. I mean, it's just a matter of reskilling the creatures and the adversaries, isn't it, for your characters. So a goblin can become a rat, a dragon become a snake. So yeah, it's easily portable across. So yeah, I hope you get that to the table.
Hey Pete, it's Jeff. I just wanted to say thank you to you for doing the Mouse Ritter review. It was kind of exactly what I was looking for at the time. I immediately hopped onto Itch and got it and printed it out. And I think it's going to be a wonderful game to try to get to the table, especially when I'm playing with younger kids and folks who really like that mouse guard / Redwall vibe. It's a super great game. I love the random tables in it. It's, what Into the Odd does for fantasy, it does for the Redwall type stuff. And I'm really jazzed about it. So thanks for pointing me in that direction. Appreciate it. Keep finding great stuff. Bye.
That was Jeff Collyer from the Tome of All Dooms podcast. Glad you found the review useful, Jeff. And I hope that you get it to the table. Let us know how you get on with it. And I will keep my eye out for other interesting RPGs and things off the wall. So keep listening. Thank you. You have been listening to the Dragons Are Real podcast. My name is Pete Jones. You can find more information at my website at petejones.neocities.org or at my blog at dragonsarealpodcast.tumblr.com. The opening music was Fireflies and Stardust by Kevin MacLeod. The closing music, also by Kevin MacLeod, was Fretless